I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond.
I would often be up in the early hours editing and, very much kind of just doing it all myself, driven by pure passion.
Because I'm yet to meet a mum that hasn't experienced some element of mum guilt at some point in their journey.
Or it might be as simple as, can I get out for a walk? Can I phone a friend? How can I start to chip away in tiny ways at meeting my needs?
Alongside motherhood, there exists a parallel paradox of guilt, comparison, second guessing, and pressure. And motherhood in today's world, with all the external influences and demands on women, is different to the previous generations. And I definitely feel it. It's tough and at times seemingly impossible to juggle. This week's guest, Zoe, mum, founder of Motherkind, and now author to her brand new book, Motherkind, and you can get this in the episode description if you follow the link, is here to help us find a happier path in motherhood, free from pressure and perfectionism. Welcome, Zoe, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today because you're very busy.
No, I would always make time for you, Pip. It's always nice to hear your own intro back, isn't it?
All these things you've done, all these things you've created. Zoe, one of the things that I'm really interested in, and having seen you recently at your amazing launch event, is, I guess, can you fill us in on a bit of the backstory as to why Motherkind was born? Thank goodness it was, because we need it. But what led you to be the person that was like, right, we need to sort this out?
So I never thought I would be the person. I was in marketing. I was kind of happy in my career, didn't love it, didn't hate it. But when I had my first daughter, Jessie, I didn't struggle so much with things to do with her. I struggled with things to do with my emotional reactions to becoming a mother. So I found it really hard how different I felt. I really struggled with the sleep deprivation and the comparison and how hard I was on myself, with the pressure and the perfectionism. I have those traits in my personality, but I found that the volume just got turned up to 1,000. So I thought, well, there must be some resources. There must be a podcast or some workshops or a book that I can read about my experience. I didn't want to read about how to wean or sleep train or change a nappy or get the latch right. I had books on those sorts of things. Lots of them were very unhelpful, actually. What I wanted was what's going on with me, and I didn't find it. So I've always been a reader and a researcher, and I've always been super curious. So I just started to read around, and I realized that what I was going through was actually completely normal. There was something called matrescence, that a lot of those traits do come up extra loud, like control and perfectionism, when we feel so out of control in early motherhood. And learning about those things, I also learned a lot about how to be kinder to myself, how to relax into it, how to trust myself more, how to control less, how to take the pressure off. And I felt really, really passionately that more people, more mothers needed to know about this. So I would just tell everyone that I met, essentially. And one day I would complain about the content. I'd say, why is all the content aimed at mothers? If it's talking to us, it tended to talk about three things. How much gin you need to drink to get through it. The best-selling book at the time was Hurrah for Gin, brilliantly funny, but not an amazing solution to the overwhelm of motherhood. It would talk about what to wear, a lot of content about telling mothers what to wear, how to do, mum run style, all that sort of thing. Again, I was like, interesting, but I want far deeper content. And lots of content at the time about how to start a side hustle in motherhood on your maternity leave. Well, I was like, that is not me. I'm not interested in doing that. So I felt really frustrated about the content and the landscape. And I really wanted to start a conversation which was much deeper, much more nuanced, much more expert-led, rather than just celebrities telling their experience. I really wanted it to be, can I find the best experts in the world, and can they help us with our emotional experience of motherhood? And so, to cut a very long story short, I decided that I would do it very reluctantly because I'm very introverted. I never wanted a public platform. I didn't have any social media. I didn't know how to use social media. I was tech allergic. I didn't know what to do with tech. I'd never even interviewed anyone, let alone, some of the people that I ended up interviewing. So I was a kind of reluctant founder. But as I got into it, I realized it was absolutely my purpose and my passion. And what fueled me was the feedback. So this is that is the fuel that kept me going. Is week after week people would say, you've actually changed my experience of motherhood, and so that would keep me going for another week. But at the start it was just me, and I would often be up, if my baby wasn't awake, I would often be up in the early hours editing, and very much kind of just doing it all myself, driven by pure passion.
And thank goodness that you've had that relentless passion, Zoe, honestly, because I think, kind of as I alluded to in the introduction to today, is I feel like we're almost this guinea pig era of mothers. And I remember when I was going back to work after I had my first son, my mother-in-law being like, "You're doing what? You're going back to work? Don't be ridiculous. We survived as a family on one salary, and you had a child now, so you stay at home, and that's just what you do." And I feel like we're in this really different generation where we're challenging that context, which is great and empowering, and we can, have our careers, and that's lovely. But also it comes this whole other flip side of challenges and juggles, and difficulties, I suppose, that I don't really feel have ever been massively explored generationally until us, ultimately. And I think one of the things that I love from the work that you do is bringing to the surface the old kind of, I think it was like a bit of a 70s term, matrescence. I think I've said that right.
Yeah.
That's that the right way. And what does it mean, Zoe? And why do you talk about that? Why do you think it's so important that in 2024 mothers know about what this is as well?
Yeah, I am so passionate about this word. And yesterday I did something really cool. I went out onto the streets of London and I asked hundreds of people. I held up a sign saying, "Do you know how to say this word? And do you know what it was?" And no one knew either answer. So we have got a long way to go to get this word out. Really passionate about helping us to get there. So matrescence is just like adolescence. So when we go from being a teen to an adult, everybody knows it's a time when your hormones change, your bodies change, your values change, your friendships change. It's a time of questioning. It's a time when you try on lots of different identities. It's essentially a really bumpy time, but at the end of it, you emerge kind of more you, hopefully supported. Well, matrescence is exactly the same, but the process of becoming a mother. And the reason I think it's so, so, so important for everyone to know this word is a couple of things. Firstly, it pushes out the timeline. So lots of people, because we have this kind of 6-week checkup, and we have the fourth trimester, and even, have you got to the first year? People, if they're still feeling that cocktail of emotions, that sleep deprivation, that exhaustion, that resentment to their partner, or not knowing what they want to do about work, if they're still feeling that year in, people they think they're failing. Whereas what matrescence does, it really pushes out the timeline. So lots of experts is 7 to 10 years. Some people say it's actually forever. So that's the first. Absolutely love it, because it gives us more time to figure out who we are now as mothers, because motherhood is the one thing that changes everything else in your life. And the analogy that I use is like a jigsaw puzzle. So having a baby, going through matrescence, is like throwing up the jigsaw puzzle, throwing up the picture of who you are, and slowly by slowly putting the pieces back together again, making lots of mistakes along the way. So, okay, I'm going to do that sort of mother. I'm going to be that sort of mother. Oh no, that doesn't feel right. Or that's not the sort of child I've got. And then you replace it with another piece. Same with your partnership, same with work, same with the mental load, same with your family. Every element of your life is a piece of this jigsaw puzzle. You spend time in those early years, definitely in the first 5 years, kind of putting back together again. And the reason I love that analogy, and mothers tell me it really helps them, is because it normalizes putting the piece in the wrong place, putting it back again. It normalizes not knowing. It normalizes an emerging picture as opposed to a complete one. And the other reason I really, really love the word, and I think it's really powerful and important, is that it recognizes that not only is it about caring for our child, for our children, it's also about caring for a new version of ourselves. so that when a child is born, a new version of us is born too. And that one word just kind of encapsulates it all. And when I first heard it, I realized that I wasn't failing for finding it hard. I was actually doing it right. Just that when teens struggle through adolescence, you're doing it right. Like you're actually meant to question, and you're meant to find it a bit tricky and a bit bumpy and a bit discombobulating. So that was really helpful to me, because I genuinely thought, I'm just not cut out for this. I'm doing so wrong. Like everyone else seems to be gliding through it, and I'm here like scrabbling and feeling pulled apart. It's actually the moment I learned that word, I was like, oh, okay. So I'm kind of winning because I'm failing, if that makes sense. It's meant to be like that.
Normalizing that journey that is rocky.
That's right. That's right. And the moment you normalize it, because what I see almost exclusively, I have quite a busy coaching practice, and I've coached thousands of women one-to-one, is that when we don't know that that's normal and that's how it's supposed to be, we blame ourselves almost universally. I've seen that. Okay, that must be me. So the moment we can hear that word and understand the concept behind it, hopefully mothers think, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. And the moment I think there's nothing wrong with me, that is so freeing, because then we can extend more compassion to ourselves. Our self-worth increases, and when our self-worth increases, we find it easier to advocate for ourselves in the health system, in our homes, in our jobs. And when we start thinking that there's something wrong with me, that chips away at our worth, which means that we find it much harder to believe in ourselves as a mother. Believing in ourselves as a mother is kind of a foundation for thriving. I talk about in the book, how to thrive. That's the foundation of believing in yourself.
I love that. And I also think, Zoe, like as a new mum, when you are going through a hurdle, be that sleep or feeding or whatever, the most powerful thing you can often hear from another new mum is just me too, like just that normalization. And we're in this time where we don't live in the same society that we did generationally. We've moved away perhaps from friends and family. We don't have that village of hands-on support that we may have had before. We've got these extra challenges of work, returning to work, careers, whatever that might look like, with a reduced support network, a stretched medical support network from an NHS perspective. So we haven't even got that. We haven't got the social support. We've got these extra pressures. And then we have social media, which is beautiful in so many aspects, but in others, it can paint this picture where everyone is looking great and thriving in motherhood and it's all completely seamless. And you can sometimes sit back like, well, what's going on in my world and why don't I fit into that? So I think it's a really, really difficult time, which is why it's so powerful. I think the work that you're doing in supporting mums. And I know that you mentioned that some of the feedback from the book, from those that have read it before it's been kind of actually on the shelves, is that it's changed mothers' lives. And I know that sounds like a big statement, but I get it. I completely get how the work that you do and that Motherkind has the impact to do that, because you just get in your head in this vulnerable time. And I think hearing these tools and techniques, knowing that what you're experiencing is normal and why it's normal, completely changes that game for mothers.
And I think that's why I was so keen as well, that it's not just my experience and it's not just my client's experience. It's like really heavyweight experts
Yeah.
really have, like Dr. Gabor Mate, for example, been studying human development and parenting for 50 plus years, and when he says it's actually the hardest time to be a mother since the Second World War. So when he says something like that, it's like, okay, this isn't just Zoe saying it. Okay, maybe she just wants to make me feel better. Or this isn't just Pip saying it, maybe it's actually unbelievably credible and smart and distinguished experts saying it. And that is all in the book, because I know that I needed that. And I remember when Dr. Gabor said that to me. And if you don't know Dr. Gabor, he's probably like the world's leading thinker on human development, I'd say. When he said that to me, I was like, oh, okay, now I can listen. Lots of people had said it to me. So I think that's what's also quite unique about the book, is the depth of the expertise that I've drawn on and had the privilege of speaking to really help crack through that inner critic that tells you that it's you. It's like, okay, well, listen to this guy or this girl. because they really know what they're talking about and they're saying.
That validation, isn't it? That kind of validation of actually what you're experiencing it's a real thing, and it's okay to feel that.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's context that we should just we obviously feel really blessed when you have a baby and you feel really blessed to be a mother, and that's all great. But it's almost like because you've got there, you shouldn't be able to feel anything other than just blessed and lucky and elated. And there's this whole other context that can come with motherhood.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to distinguish the two. So, and this was really helpful for me, is learning to separate out the love that I have for my children with my experience of motherhood, because they're not the same thing. And I think we conflate the two, so that when you say, you know, I'm really exhausted, or I'm finding the mental load just too much, or you know, I feel so resentful to my partner because I'm the default parent, and the split of domestic tasks is so unfair. When you say those things, often women are then gaslit when people respond and they say, oh, so you don't love your children. So the most helpful thing to do is separate out the two. You can absolutely adore your children, which is how I feel more than anything in the whole entire world. I would die for those girls. Being a mother is the greatest privilege of my life. And the institution of motherhood that we are operating in is really challenging. And those two are separate, and you can love one and hate the other. And I think that requires a level of emotional maturity from both ourselves, from people around us, and society. Sometimes isn't there yet. It's much easier to keep mothers small and silent, because nothing will make you go small and silent. It's someone saying, oh, so you don't love your children. So in a way, it's quite a handy trick that often is played on mothers to keep us quiet, because when we keep quiet, systems don't change. So we have to have the confidence and the belief and the confidence in our love for our children to be able to say, and this is really hard. I remember I used to be asked a few times by journalists early on, you know, what will your children think if they see your work? I said, they'll be absolutely thrilled, because they will be able to see that what I'm really trying to do is make the institution of motherhood and how we operate within the culture ourselves better, so that you can start to love both elements. You love your children, and you can love, you know, how you are as a mother.
You're literally the driving force for your children's motherhood experience. Should your girls decide to become mums and have families, you know, there is no deeper passion, is there, than doing it for your children ultimately. So, you know, it's incredible. And I think one of the emotions that we hear about probably the most is around mum guilt, Zoe. And I'd love to hear your kind of take on that, because I'm yet to meet a mum that hasn't experienced some element of mum guilt at some point in their journey.
Yeah, it's so universal. It always makes me laugh that we have mum guilt. Like, it's so pervasive that it has its own phrase now. So the most important thing with guilt is to understand it. And the moment we understand it, you'll free yourself from it. So let me quickly explain. Guilt, true guilt, or productive guilt, as I call it, is when we've done something wrong that goes against our values. So the other day I put my little girl in the car and I bashed, you know, and you bash their head on the car seat.
We've all done it.
Felt guilty, like rightly so. If I didn't feel guilty, I'd be really worried about myself, because I hurt my child and she was crying. And so I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I apologized, I amended, and I made a mental note. Okay, I need to lower her like a couple of degrees. That was productive guilt. That is good. It's only psychopaths who feel no guilt, because guilt is on the same coin as empathy. You have to have empathy to feel guilt. Like, we want it. We want that guilt. It helps us to, when we're going off course, helps us to course correct. It's actually a really good thing. When it gets complicated is when we put that word mum in front of it. Because when we put that word mum in front of it, what it essentially means is that it becomes not guilt.
Yeah.
And I think the not true guilt, as I was just describing. And I think because the emotional experience of motherhood is so complex, and we're also tired and time poor, we just slap that label on it. I feel guilty, whereas actually it's not guilt. So what it normally is one of 5 things. I'll quickly run you through them, because I think it's really helpful for people to understand. So the first one is tension. So a lot of what we call guilt is just tension. It's just wanting to be in 2 places at once, wishing that you could be sat here, Pip, like we are now, and also wishing that we could be with our kids. I'm feeling that. I feel that constantly throughout.
Yeah.
When I'm with my kids, I wish I could be with my emails, moving my mission forward. Tension is just part of motherhood. And the moment we accept that, it's like pulling a rope and we're pulled in a million directions. It's like dropping the rope and being like, oh, I just accept I'm feeling tension. That is okay. In fact, the more expansive and beautiful often your life is, the more tension you will feel, because you have to make hard choices. And whenever we choose A, we can't choose B, there's tension. We can't cut ourselves off or in quarters or in eighths, as I often wish I could cut myself in. So that's the first one. You're probably just feeling tension. And tension is part of life. It's part of motherhood. It's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You and I are not doing anything wrong by sitting here. We're doing a lot right. We are living into our passions. We are supporting ourselves financially and our families financially. We are modeling to our children what it looks like to do work that you love. We're modeling to our girls and our boys that, you know, mothers work too. So I feel no guilt for being sat here, but I feel tension. They're not the same thing. The second one is often what we call is guilt. It's often our standards. So the brain works by essentially running off the subconscious. 95% of our decisions and what we think about life and ourselves are run in a part of our brain called the subconscious. So we think that we're kind of making these rational decisions when we're not. Standards often sit in our subconscious that we absorb. We absorbed them when we were growing up. We absorbed them from a lot of the soap operas that you and I would have watched in the 80s and 90s, where often the mums looked a certain way. We would have absorbed without even realizing it what a good mother does. And when I did this exercise, Pip, where I wrote down a good mother, ... it was like mind blowing to me what I was measuring myself against. I was writing down things like doesn't work, does every pickup, does every drop off, cooks meal every night, does every bedtime, never shouts. It's basically this weird, robotic, perfect person. Yeah. But that is what I was, those were all in my subconscious. I wasn't aware of them. But when I got them out, I was like, oh, no wonder that I feel guilty when I don't make pickup, or I do a freezer tea, or I don't do bedtime, or I share the load of my partner and my friends and my extended family. No wonder. So when we can get those standards out that we're measuring ourselves against, then we can create our own standards. And that is where you really start to free yourself from guilt. I rarely feel any guilt these days, any unproductive, because I stand like I'm operating against my rules and defining my standards. So that's really powerful. The third one is inner critic. So a lot of what we call guilt is really just that part of our brain that criticizes us, that tells us we're not good enough, we're not doing it right, we need to feel guilty. And the key there is to notice when that voice is coming in and try to create a bit of space from it by realizing that it's not true, it's not your truth. And you can replace it, like I'm doing the best I can. Or, you know, my standard is that I do bedtime 3 times a week and I'm doing that, so I'm winning.
Yeah.
But the other one is really fascinating, which is permeating, which is where we take on someone else's feelings and we call it our guilt. For example, that's when someone tries to guilt her. Like when we might say to a partner, friend, oh, can you do bedtime? And they have a grumble about it. We might take that on. Or even our kids, like my kids, I go to this breathwork class and I love it. And they always cry when I go because they want me to do bedtime. But I just don't take on those are their feelings about me going. I don't feel sad about going. Actually, I'm teaching them resilience by showing them they can have hard feelings about it. They can resolve those feelings and I come back. So that's really important, is what are my feelings about this? The last one is often what we call guilt is actually shame, which is hard to talk about because shame is when we've decided that we are bad. So guilt is I've done a behavior that's bad. Shame is I am bad. So if ever you hear in your internal dialogue, I'm a bad mum, I'm failing, I am good enough, you've tripped into shame. And shame's really hard because it kind of colors all of you. There's nowhere to go with it. The way to free yourself from it is to share it. So share it with how you're feeling with a partner or a friend, someone that can just hold space for you. It's not going to jump in with a solution or a don't be silly. Someone can just say, yeah, that sounds really hard. Makes sense. You'd be feeling like that. Sounds like your inner critic is really is really loud. What could you say that would be kind to yourself? That combination of those things make up what I estimate is about 80% of what we call guilt. And actually, I think only about 20% is that productive guilt. So I guilt rule. And you're right, like I've got hundreds of mothers out there from the early readers applying this tool, and mothers are telling me they're experiencing what I'm experiencing with it, which is that they're not feeling any guilt, any unproductive mum guilt. They're feeling correct, right-sized, productive guilt when they, stand on their kid's toe or whatever we do. But that guilt for working, for being imperfect, for sharing the load, for snapping, for being human has gone. I really want that for everyone, because motherhood is hard enough. We deserve to do it without that weight of feeling like we're doing it wrong on top of that.
Imagine if we lived in a world, Zoe, where, your mission is, mass scale, and actually mums don't feel that. They can go about their lives and thrive and not feel that. Like, that excites me for the next generation.
That is the plan. So it starts with the book. And then I think very, very, very often, what would it look like if this became as normal as some of the things that we all learn without thinking about it, like, at MCT, how to change a nappy.
Yeah.
Completely normal. That you learn how to change a nappy, you learn how to drive a car, and you learn how to completely reframe your mum guilt. Like, that would just, to me, be the absolute dream, because we could create a generation of mothers who do feel like they can thrive in motherhood, who don't feel guilty. And I think the knock-on impact would be unbelievable, because you would get so many more mothers leaning into their strengths, leaning into their power, leaning into their passion, into their dream, back by the system as much. I think we would see the rise of a lot of more people like you and I, Pip, advocating for mothers, a lot more activists. I think we would see change at in corporation levels. I think we see change. I think it would be phenomenal. It's definitely my plan.
I love it.
Have 2 young kids, so I'm also applying all these tools constantly. What are my values? Like, where do I want to put my precious time and energy? Am I getting that split of my time and energy right? Currently, every single that changes, but I'm in this work for the long term, like I really am, and maybe it'll take another decade for me to get it as mass scale as I want it to.
And I was thinking that when you were talking about the kind of mothers before you said it, that like system change, we're starting now, but we have the power to be those mothers' voices and to kind of follow your Motherkind kind of tribe, I suppose, and get that word out there that then is going to create those larger changes that is going to, hopefully in your mission, Zoe, kind of blow up and create this. Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it if the next generation of mothers didn't have this constant tugging pressure, and it really taints what should be, a much more thriving experience, I think. But often we are just trying to survive and be pulled in a million directions. And so I love your mission of creating change. And I think one of the things that definitely is, when I speak to mums, that sort of is talked about, and again, I think often kept in that taboo box maybe a little bit, and it definitely shocked me when I first became a mum, but it's some of those kind of unexpected emotions that it can throw up. And I am never a jealous person. I never thought I had jealousy in my body until I remember my husband saying, "Do you mind if I go for a run?" And I was sat there breastfeeding our first newborn baby for like the millionth time, feeling like I hadn't exercised in forever and was just eating chocolate hobnobs, thinking like, I'm so jealous that you can just walk out that door and go for a run. And that's my thing. And you don't even like running. And now you're running and I'm sat here. And I remember being like, wow, I was really shocked. And I was like, who does that leave me as? What is this feeling that I'm feeling? And I wondered if from the, I know you've supported thousands of mums on your mission and in the coaching work that you do as well. Are there any more common emotions that you see that often women find really difficult to talk about?
I think that I would call it resentment.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
Although jealousy is often a sign that someone has what you want, and it makes sense that you would want some time for yourself. Every single human needs time for themselves. That doesn't go away when we become mothers.
I only think it's more.
I use this analogy that I really like, which is like our needs as mothers are like beach balls that we push down, and we keep pushing them down. And often we're like, no, I don't need to tend to my needs. And I don't have needs. It's okay. It's okay. And then it explodes out, often in rage at our partner, rage at our children, sometimes rage internally at ourselves, that critic getting louder and louder and louder. So it makes complete sense to me to experience that. And I think when you are the default parent, and a big sign that you're the default parent is that you can't just pop out without checking the childcare. That's the biggest sign you're the default. Yeah. Like you're the one thinking, okay, well, who's going to look after the children? If you have a partner or a co-parent who can just go on a run, meet friends, have a work meeting, knowing the children will be taken care of, you're not the default parent.
Yeah.
So often, that resentment is very real. And the most important thing is to deal with it, because it does build up and it gets harder and harder and harder over the days, the weeks, and years. And I think that's why the divorce rate is so high.
Yeah.
Couples with children under 5, we know it's at one of the highest points. So that's the most important thing, is to deal with it. First of all, to deal with it in yourself, to normalize it. It makes sense. I'm feeling this feeling. There's a tool that I love called It's Not Surprising That, just to help you soften those feelings. So it's not surprising I feel jealous of my husband going on a run, given that ... I really want to go out there. I haven't exercised. So you can just feel like there's nothing wrong with me. This emotion is, because the emotions that we push away, they get louder and bigger, what we resist. So that's the first step in that example. And the second step would be to then think, okay, I'm breastfeeding. Maybe it's not possible to go out for a run, or maybe I haven't had the health checks and maybe I can't do that. But could I get out for a walk tonight? Like, how could I facilitate? Could I get out for a 10-minute walk before I go into the evening? Could that be asking a family member or a friend or a co-parent or a partner? What would that look like? If that's not possible, could I get out for a walk with the buggy? Like, maybe what I'm craving is just that fresh air and that movement. I could walk quite quick. So it's always taking action on those feelings, not just letting them build up or think that they don't matter or that you don't matter.
Yeah.
So that's one feeling, is resentment for sure. The second one is anger. And I think, again, like really taboo. And when I wrote out that should list, good mothers ... on mine was never feel angry. And I think that's just extends to all women, like women, and anger has been taboo.
Yeah.
So I think anger is a completely normal reaction to our needs not being met often. Anger is about not having needs met often. So that's why there's so many mothers who just can't get their needs met. They don't even know what their needs are at this point. So the first thing is to normalize it, know that there's nothing wrong with you. Anger is just trying to tell you something. Don't ignore it. If you've screamed at your child in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, absolutely repair. So Dr. Becky, who is kind of a supporter of Motherkind, and she's an amazing parenting expert, she says the number one skill for any parent is the skill of repair. Love grows in the repair. It's actually how we strengthen our connections. It's not about trying to be perfect. It's about being imperfect, but being able to say, I'm really sorry that mummy shouted. It actually wasn't anything to do with you. What it was to do with was, and then you give a kind of age appropriate. Because what children do is, if we don't do that, they decide it's their fault. Children are actually quite narcissistic. So they think around them is down to them. So unless we change that, they will start to make that story, I'm a burden, my feelings stress other people out. And of course, you end up getting adults, and women in particular, who have those core beliefs about their feelings and about themselves. And we get what's called the good girl adaptation, I talk about quite a lot in the book. So repair is really, really, really important. Think about when you've put out the fire, you need to think about fireproofing. Like, why do I feel so angry? Like, do I have enough support? How might I get myself a little bit more support? What is going on that I am feeling so angry? Just bring that loving curiosity and see what comes up. And of course, you're not going to get a spa weekend because you've asked that question. You might think, drinking enough water. And actually, dehydration is a massive, massive trigger for an overactive amygdala, which is our fear center.
I'm so grumpy if I'm dehydrated, like genuinely so short-tempered and grumpy.
Might be as simple as that, or it might be as simple as, can I get out for a walk? Can I phone a friend? How can I start to chip away in tiny ways at meeting my needs in a better way? So I would say resentment and anger, probably two of the big feelings.
And like you say, probably shockers, because as women, that's not what we're meant to be, right? It's not what's meant to be characteristic of being female.
Especially not as mothers. Yeah.
So interesting. Zoe, I've got to ask you, you've been on the Motherkind mission. I followed your amazing page on Instagram. Why did you decide to put it in a book?
Because people would message me a lot saying, this has happened, or I'm feeling this. Can you point me to an episode? And I would think, I can point you to an episode. What I really want to give you is like a page or a quick tool or a quick cheat sheet. And so that's where I thought, what would be incredible is based off the past 7 years research, thousands of hours. I think it's well over 10,000 hours now of studying and researching. Wouldn't it be amazing if someone messaged me and said, I feel so guilty? I could say, here's your tool. Or if someone said, I feel so down on myself and negative, and I could say, here's your tool. If someone said so much, I'd say, here's your tool. So that's what the book is. Like almost any emotional experience that you are going through in your motherhood, you will be able to find a concept or a tool or a little phrase or a little idea, and they're all broken down in super simple ways for tired eyes and tired minds. You can find in the book, and that's why I did it. I think it's really helpful when you're trying to create a movement like I am, have a resource because it's visual. I want people, and when we were designing the cover, I kept saying I want it to be that you don't feel ashamed of holding it on the tube, that you feel proud of holding it. Like I want it to look cool and look like you would want your photo taken with it. I don't want it to look like a sort of boring, textbook or self-help book. So I think we've done that. And that's another thing that I'm really, really keen about, is that this book gets passed around. I think it'll be one of those books that kind of gets recommended a lot from word of mouth.
Oh, Zoe, I know it will be. I've got a copy. It's gonna be recommended. It's gonna be the thing that when you find out a friend's having a baby, you're like, this is what they need. You know what I mean? They don't need 100 grey baby grows. They need something to allow them to thrive and to look after themselves. 100%. Like you nailed it. Like 100%. It's gonna be that. It is gonna be that.
Last year when I was writing the book, and I always buy something for the mum, never for the baby. And it's normally like a candle or something kind of luxurious. And I was thick in writing the book, and I thought, do you know what? I really just wish, even though it's my book, I just really wish I could give her Motherkind, because I know that if she could read that in those last few weeks, and you might have finished work and you're sort of waiting for baby, it will radically transform her experience of motherhood. I just knew it, but I didn't have it to give then. And so that's why I feel so excited, because imagine if we could get that not only into the women who are already mothers, and I think in some way you get it because you're like, I've experienced that guilt and that rage and that resentment. So I think you get it. But also, if I've tried to write it in such a way that if you're pregnant or even if you're thinking about starting a family, it's going to give you the tools. It's like preventative medicine, as opposed to, if you're already a mum, you're reading it because you need the help now. So I hope for both groups it's really helpful.
Absolutely. Oh, Zoe, it's incredible. And I'm so grateful that Motherkind exists as a mum in 2024. Everyone that comes on the podcast, I ask for 3 top tips. Had you I know you've got like 103 top tips at least. Could you give us 3 of your like snappy tips to go to? And of course, read the book for more.
Guilt, it's probably tension. You're probably just wishing you could be in more places at once. So just accept that and the guilt will wash away. The second one is, what would you say to a good friend in the same situation? So we're so kind and compassionate and understanding to our friends, and so hard and harsh and mean to ourselves. So what would you say to a good friend in the same situation? And the third one is, what what you give your child, maybe you also need to. So as you give your child a nutritious meal, maybe you need a nutritious meal. As you give your child a glass of water, maybe you need a glass of water. As you plonk your child down on the sofa in the middle of the day because they need a rest, maybe you need to plonk yourself down on the sofa in the day because you need a rest too.
Zoe, thank you so much. I am so grateful for your time today, but also the work that you've done to date, because I know it's a relentless mission of yours, you know, from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective, and it's just what mums and women need. So, you know, from the bottom of my heart as a mum and as someone who supports mums, thank you, because the work that you're doing, it will change the world. It will, it will.
I really appreciate your support, and the feeling's very mutual. So thank you.
Thank you.